Imagine sleeping on a cold sidewalk every single night, with no mother to tuck you in, no father to protect you, and no one in the entire world who even knows your name. Now imagine that one morning, a black limousine pulls up beside you. The door opens, and the richest man in the city steps out and looks directly at you. He doesn't call security. He doesn't walk past you like everyone else does. He kneels down, looks into your eyes, and says 4 words that would change everything. I choose you. Come. This is not a fairy tale. This is the story of a boy named Daniel, and the billionaire who adopted him. A story about loneliness, rejection, second chances, and the kind of love that money can never buy, but somehow, in this case, brought 2 broken hearts together. Stay with me until the end, because the final twist in this story will teach you something about kindness that you will never forget. Let's go back to the beginning. Daniel was only 6 years old when he lost his parents in a car accident on a rainy night. One moment he was a normal boy with a normal family, laughing in the back seat of his father's car. The next moment, his whole world was gone. He had no grandparents, no uncles, no aunts willing to take him in. So Daniel was sent to a government orphanage on the edge of the city, a gray, tired building with peeling paint and cold hallways that echoed every footstep. At the orphanage, Daniel quickly learned a hard truth: not every child gets picked. Families would come every few months, walking down the rows of children with hopeful smiles, choosing the cutest babies or the most talkative toddlers. Daniel, quiet, shy, and already scarred by grief, was overlooked again and again. Years passed. He turned 7, then 8, then 10. Other kids came and went, adopted into new families, waving goodbye with excited tears. Daniel stayed. He watched the door open for everyone else, but never for him. By the time he was 12, Daniel had built walls around his heart so thick that even the caretakers said he had given up on being chosen. He stopped smiling at visitors. He stopped hoping. He told himself the truth that hurt the least: nobody wants a broken boy with no story worth loving. Every night, he would sit by the small window of his dormitory and watch the cars pass on the street below, especially the expensive ones. He used to imagine what kind of people sat inside them. Did they have children? Did their children know how lucky they were? He never imagined that one of those cars would one day stop just for him. On the other side of the city lived a man named Richard Callahan, though the newspapers just called him the Callahan Empire. He was 58 years old, and he had built one of the largest logistics and technology companies in the country from nothing but a small warehouse and a stubborn belief that he could make something of himself. Richard was, by every definition, a billionaire. He owned a mansion with 14 rooms, a private jet, and a name that opened every door in the business world. But behind the wealth was a man who had lost the only thing money could never buy back: his family. Years earlier, Richard had a wife and a son. His son, Michael, had been the light of his life, funny, curious, and endlessly kind to everyone he met. But at just 8 years old, Michael was diagnosed with a rare illness. Richard spent millions trying to save him, flying in specialists from other countries, funding research, refusing to give up. But in the end, no amount of money could keep his son alive. Michael passed away, and not long after, Richard's wife, unable to bear the grief in that empty house, left him. Richard was alone. Rich beyond imagination, but alone in a way that no bank account could fix. For years, Richard threw himself into his work, building his empire even bigger, as if success could fill the hole his son left behind. It never did. He attended charity galas, donated to hospitals, funded schools, but every act of generosity felt hollow, like he was trying to pour water into a cup with no bottom. One evening, his assistant convinced him to attend a charity dinner supporting local orphanages. Richard almost said no. He had said no to a dozen similar events that year. But something made him say yes this time. At that dinner, a slideshow played, showing photos of children waiting to be adopted. Most images flashed by quickly. But one photo stayed on the screen a second longer than the rest. A photo of a quiet, serious-looking boy sitting alone by a window, staring out at nothing in particular. Richard couldn't explain it, but something in that boy's eyes reminded him of Michael, not in appearance, but in that same quiet loneliness he remembered from Michael's hospital days, when his son used to stare out the window wondering why he couldn't play outside like other kids. Richard asked one question that night. "Who is that boy?" The answer would change two lives forever. The orphanage director was stunned when she received a call the very next morning from Richard Callahan's office, requesting a private visit. When Richard arrived at the orphanage, he didn't come with cameras or reporters. He came alone, dressed simply, almost unrecognizable without his usual tailored suits. He asked to meet Daniel. Daniel was called into the visiting room, expecting another disappointing 5-minute meeting like all the others before. He sat down across from the well-dressed stranger, arms crossed, eyes guarded. He had learned not to hope. "Hi, Daniel," Richard said gently. "My name is Richard." Daniel didn't answer. He just stared at the table. Richard didn't push. Instead, he simply said, "I saw a photo of you. You were looking out a window. What were you thinking about?" For the first time in years, someone had asked Daniel a real question, not, "Are you being good?" or, "Do you want a family?" but something that actually wanted to understand him. Daniel finally looked up. "I was thinking about my parents," he said quietly. "I still remember my dad's laugh. Nobody here ever asks me about them. They just want to know if I'll behave for a new family." Richard felt something crack open in his chest. He thought of Michael, of all the nights he wished he could hear his son's laugh just one more time. "I think," Richard said slowly, "that remembering the people we lost isn't something we should ever be told to forget. It means we love them. That's not a problem to fix. That's something to be proud of." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Tears he hadn't allowed himself to cry in front of a stranger in years. Richard visited Daniel 3 more times that month. He didn't bring expensive gifts or make big promises. He brought books. He asked about school. He listened more than he talked. Slowly, the wall Daniel had built for 6 years began to crack, brick by brick. On his 4th visit, Richard asked Daniel directly, "Would you like to come live with me? Not because I feel sorry for you. Because I think you might understand loneliness the same way I do, and maybe we could stop being lonely together." Daniel didn't answer with words. He simply reached out and hugged Richard, the first hug he had given anyone since the night his parents died. The adoption process wasn't instant, and it wasn't easy. Government agencies scrutinized Richard's application carefully. His wealth meant nothing to them. What mattered was whether he could provide real love, stability, and time. Richard had to prove himself. He attended parenting classes. He answered dozens of interview questions about his intentions. He even had to convince the review board that adopting Daniel wasn't a publicity stunt for his company's image, a rumor that some tabloids tried to spread once the story leaked. Meanwhile, Daniel struggled too. Moving into Richard's massive mansion after years in a crowded orphanage dormitory felt overwhelming, almost frightening. The silence in the huge house at night reminded him too much of loss, not comfort. He had nightmares. He had trust issues. There were nights he'd lock himself in his new bedroom, unsure if this new life was real or if he'd wake up back in the orphanage. Richard, despite being used to solving problems with money and power, realized quickly that healing Daniel's heart required something he couldn't buy: patience. He hired a child psychologist, not to fix Daniel, but to help both of them navigate grief together. He learned to sit with Daniel in silence when words weren't needed. He learned that success in business meant nothing compared to the small victory of Daniel finally calling him Dad for the first time, which happened almost 8 months after the adoption was finalized, on an ordinary Tuesday evening while they were fixing a bicycle chain together in the garage. Richard cried that night, alone in his study, not because he was sad, but because for the first time in years, his house finally felt like a home again. Over the next 2 years, Daniel slowly transformed. He rejoined school with confidence. He made friends. He discovered a passion for building things, inspired by watching Richard's engineers design new technology for the company. Richard enrolled him in coding classes, robotics camps, anything that lit a spark in his eyes. But more importantly, Richard made sure Daniel never forgot where he came from. Every year, on the anniversary of Daniel's parents' passing, they would visit the memorial together, and Richard would let Daniel talk about them for as long as he needed, because he understood, better than anyone, that healing doesn't mean forgetting. Here is the twist that makes this story unforgettable. A few years later, as a teenager, Daniel asked Richard a question that surprised him. "Dad, can we help other kids like me? Kids who are still waiting to be picked?" Richard didn't hesitate. Together, father and son used part of the Callahan fortune to establish a foundation, not just for donating money, but for changing how adoption worked in their city. They funded mentorship programs matching orphan children with volunteer families for weekend visits, so no child would ever feel completely invisible while waiting for a permanent home. They renovated orphanages to feel less like institutions and more like actual homes. Daniel, once the boy nobody chose, grew up to personally visit these orphanages, sitting with lonely children exactly the way Richard once sat with him, asking not, "Will you behave?" but, "What are you thinking about?" The billionaire who once tried to fill his emptiness with success finally found what money could never buy: purpose, given to him by the son he chose, and multiplied by the son giving that same chance to others. Daniel's story teaches us something simple but powerful. Every child, every person, deserves to be chosen. Not because of what they can offer, but simply because they exist. Richard didn't just give Daniel a mansion, an education, or a fortune. He gave him something far more valuable: the belief that he was worth loving. And Daniel gave Richard something the billionaire had lost the day his first son passed away: a reason to hope again, and a way to turn his pain into purpose for other children who needed it most. Sometimes the richest thing a person can give isn't money. It's attention. It's patience. It's simply saying to someone who has been overlooked their whole life, "I see you. I choose you." So that's the story of the billionaire who adopted an orphan, and in doing so, healed 2 broken hearts at once. If this story touched you, remember this: you don't need to be a billionaire to make someone feel chosen. A little kindness, a little attention, a little patience, that's often all it takes to change someone's entire world. Keep choosing kindness, even when it's small. You never know whose life you might change. If you enjoyed this story, hit that subscribe button for more emotional and inspiring stories like this one, and drop a comment below telling me which part touched you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.